Hello, listeners. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Brendan Keegan, who is a 6-time president and chief executive officer, 21-time board director, 2-time best-selling author, the world's most innovative CEO award winner, and the visionary leader behind bFEARLESS Ventures, an investment and advisory firm. As president and CEO, he has successfully led 6 companies through liquidity exits with an average enterprise value increase of 750%. And has raised over $10 billion in capital while leading over 250,000 people globally. Today, he serves as co-owner and board member of Andretti Racing, United Autosports, Merchant Fleets, Pure Electric, Crane, Paper, and Sky Meadow Country Club. Additionally, Keegan serves on the boards of McLaren Racing Indy Team, Express IT Delivery, RPI Athletics Council, RPI Lally Leadership Council, and the Keegan Family Courage and Faith Foundation. This episode is full of leadership tips, strategies, philosophies for anyone at any time, any point in your career, from early career to executive. And I really hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. What does it truly mean to be a leader? Welcome to The Executive, a podcast that highlights the career journeys, struggles, successes, and day-to-day experiences of leaders. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Ritter, bringing over 10 years of experience as a leadership and career coach, L&D consultant, and healthcare executive. My mission is to guide leaders towards creating a career they can love. Thank you for listening. Now let's hear from the executive. Brendan, I'm not sure if younger leaders or early leaders ever approach you and ask for your top tips or advice, but I'm so curious if one did. What would be kind of that main takeaway that you would hope they walk away with?
Hey, it's a great question, and right now, over the course of this let's call it academic year, I've got 2 kids in college. I've actually, helped mentor 30 college kids on internships and jobs, and I have been asked that question. The advice that I give them is the first thing is, as you establish yourself in your career, establish yourself as a hard worker, work ethic. There's absolutely no replacement for being a hard worker because you control it. You don't always control your performance. You don't always control, like, do you know how to do something? Because the reality is there's a lot of things you don't know how to do. But what you do control is hard work. The second thing that I tell them is work for the hardest, toughest people you can. And they kind of look at me and I said, when I grew the most in my early career is when I worked for people that were really demanding and tough, because that's how I learned. And what I realized is when I would produce a presentation, a model, and it wasn't what they expected, they weren't picking on me. They weren't telling me I did bad work. They were actually helping me become better. And that was a big gift. And if you don't mind, the third one, which is kind of asymmetrical, is I tell them save money. And they get super confused with this one. And I say, as you build your career, there may be a time that you want to take a lateral job. You want to take a different job to gain skills that might not pay as much. And if you have built up some savings, that's going to allow you to make the best career decisions. And you're not going to be held captive to, man, I can't move out of this role. I'm doing so well. Because that role might be good and it might be compensating you well, but it might be holding you back from getting to where you ultimately want to be. So I tell people, make sure you save, because being able to choose what jobs you want, because you have some level of financial freedom and you're not held hostage to a job, will really allow you to take the best opportunities in your career. So those would be 3 quick tips that I'd throw out at, at emerging leaders, young leaders, people just starting in their careers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are the chairman and chief executive at bFEARLESS Ventures. And as you were talking about saving money and hard work and kind of learning and kind of getting your, I don't know what you would call it, kind of like having the tough moments in your life to build resilience and probably skills even, because it
Yeah.
stretches you. You're kind of building the opportunity to become fearless in your career. I mean, you build your safety net, you build the skills, you have it, you can be tough, you're resilient. Like, I don't know if those relate to your definition of fearless, but when you think of even executives that are successful now, or look at your own path, so instead of early career professionals, now individuals such as yourself, what are some of the traits that generally kind of have led to your success?
Yeah, so when you talk about being fearless, it's being fearless in a calculated manner. It's not just going and doing reckless things, but like if somebody says, "Oh, someday I want to start my own company," well, there's 10 things you got to be doing right now if that's what you want to do later. And you can't wake up at 45 and say, "Oh, I want to start my own company," but geez, my kids are in high school and they're going to go to college, and I can't start a new company. Now is when I need to maximize my income. But that's something you should have done when you were 25 and you were 28 and you were 32 and you were 36, so that now when you maybe wanted to go start something, you had the ability to do it. So when I say being fearless, it's kind of saying mapping out what you want and then taking fearless actions to get there. But when I look at traits and attributes for me personally that I try to infuse in people that have worked for me or people that I've helped in their careers, there's a number of them. The first one that I always start with is you have to have a vision. And by the way, your vision doesn't have to be right. But like, let's say you have a vision in your career, you say, "Hey, I'm 25 years old and I'd like to be a CEO of my own company by 40." Okay, that vision might not, that you might become COO by 40. You might become CEO at 32. You may not become a CEO because you wind up being chief sales officer and saying, "I love sales." But like, if you don't have a vision, then you're probably not going to become any of those. So the first is really having a vision for what you want. The second is building a professional brand around who you are. In that, too many people, like, they'll call me up and I'll talk to them and they'll say, "Hey, could you help me, find a job?" And they're like, "Tell me a little bit about yourself." And they go, "Well, this is what I've done for 18 years and here's where I went to college and here are the skills I have." And I stop them and I say, "I've already looked at your LinkedIn. I'm not, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you, tell me about yourself. Tell me who you are." And I don't think a lot of people have really thought about what their narrative is. And and I think if you do and you build a brand around who you are, like if I call up, one of your references and they say, "Hardest working guy I've ever met, most likable, people really enjoy being with him," like that's much more hireable than, got his degree here. He was 6 years at Barclays, then he went over to Citi. And I'm like, well, that doesn't tell me anything. And by the way, on the second one that I just went through, there's 82 other people who have that same background. So it's build your brand. The third is build relationships, network. And networking in some ways has never been easier. In whether it's social media platforms, ways to meet up, ways to stay in communication. And I get asked a lot of times, "Well, Brendan, like, how did you get that job? And how did you get that job? And how did you get that job?" Most of my jobs have come through my network. Where people have reached out and said, "Hey, you did a great job at that last company. We have a couple portfolio companies that are looking for support. Would you ever come talk to us?" And they haven't really come through an outward search. They've more come from my network or my network's network. So invest in relationships. I could go on and talk about more traits, but I'll just stop at those three.
It's, I'm sitting here being like, "Give me more. This is gold." And it's so interesting right now because the market, people would, depending on who you talk to, people might say that they're struggling to find their next role. And I don't really think it's ever been different that relationships are the key to finding, like, to having finding your next job be easy. And for some reason, though, it seems to have just been a lost art or a lost trait that people believe is important. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, so so where I say I think it's never been easier than right now is, first of all, you can like, let's say you say, "I want to work at XYZ company. I want to work at JP Morgan Bay Chase and investment banking." Great. You can look up who works there. You can look up who went to your college. You can look up who grew up in your hometown. You can look at your relationships and all the people that you might be connected with. You can look at, your mentors' relationships and who they know. So all of a sudden you have all these tools at your hands that how do I get like a hook in? Okay. Then once you get the hook in, you can learn so much about the people that you're meeting with. You can learn ways to connect with them. You can learn hey, this person, here's how I'm going to connect with them, and here's how I'm going to leverage that. And then here's where what I talk about is an asymmetrical approach. Two things that are lost art forms: the handwritten note. And by the way, if I opened up my cabinet right here at my home office, I have note cards and envelopes or stamps already on them, and I just send them out. And I can't tell you how many times somebody sends me a text that says, "Brennan, thank you for that card." I'm like, no, the card was thanking you, but you don't get a lot of cards. You don't get a lot of note cards. And so you're being memorable to the person and you're showing that you invested in them. And the last thing that I'm going to say, and I owe this to somebody early in my career who was a mentor to me, and it's called the law of physical presence. Nothing replaces being physically present. And I'm going to tell a story of somebody, a college junior, who was late to the hiring cycle to go into investment banking. They wound up getting an interview. They're already 9 months behind, and they get an interview. And they have a virtual meeting, and they're going to school in Scotland, and the interview's in New York. They got on a train, they took a flight, they went to New York, and they showed up in person. And the person said, "Well, I thought we were doing this virtually." And they said, "Yep, it was virtual, but I just thought I wanted to, make the investment. I think it would be better if we did it in person." Okay, this is going to sound like a stupid statement, but if that were me interviewing, that person could have been dumb as a bag of rocks and I would have hired him. I just would have said, "You got on a plane and you came here and you want to do this in person. That's what I want." So think of how do you go after what you want in an asymmetrical manner. And in some ways, people have gotten lazy investing in relationships, which quite frankly makes it easier to be unique. If I go back 20 years ago, I'd get 50 handwritten notes a year. I get 5 a year now. So you can just stand out a little bit more. Virtual is the norm. In person is, like, in some ways, the non-norm now. And so I'd say, like, go take the opportunity to be physically present. So, but I learned that lesson early in my career when somebody just said, "Brennan, there's nothing that replaces the law of physical presence." And it's true. It really is.
I'm adding that one to the list with you kind of have a vision, you develop your professional brand that's about you, you're building relationships, and you're present. I'm adding that, making that 4 at least.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, someone might be listening to this and be like, "Okay, I'm present. I have a vision. I get all that. I understand building relationships, but what do you mean by brand?" And maybe you can share how you would answer that for yourself. Like, what is your brand, Brenton, at this point in time in your career?
Yeah, so building a brand is really being reflective on, like, who are you and who do you want to be. So in my career, I had a breakthrough moment on my brand when I was in a mentor meeting, and I asked my mentor this question. I said, "Hey, you just put me in a really crappy role, and do you mind if I ask you, what did I do to get put in the penalty box?" And he looks at me and goes, "What do you mean put in the penalty box?" I go, "Well, you took me out of a pretty cool role and you put me in a, quite frankly, a crappy role. Why'd you do it?" He goes, "Well, because it's broken." And I go, "I know it's broken. It's crappy." He goes, "But you're good at fixing things. That's what you're good at." He goes, "You're really good at going in, fixing things, making them better, and making them grow." And at that point, I didn't know that's what I was good at. So having a mentor help identify what is some of your uniqueness. So what's interesting is if I look at the 6 companies that I was CEO of, 3 were turnarounds where the company was in trouble and needed to get turned around, and 3 were transformations where the company wasn't in trouble, it was just status quo. It had plateaued. It was growing 2% a year, and we wanted to get it growing 50% a year, 60% a year. And so I started saying, wait, so if I'm good at fixing things, I should build my brand around turnaround and transformational exec. I'm good at growing things. I can grow things. And then I took my personal brand a little step further. Oh, and quite frankly, I can't take credit for this. My head of marketing told me I had to do it. Is they actually brought a brand consultant and they did interviews. They did interviews with people I worked for, people that worked side by side, and people that worked underneath me. And they said, you know what your brand is, Brendan? Like when you're on a project, people feel like you're going to win. When you're in a crisis, you have a calmness in the room. Like people, and so what we came up with was you help take people's fear, uncertainty, and doubt away, their FUD, and you kind of go, okay, hey, we got a problem. No problem. We're going to fix it. This has happened before. We're not the first company. And you bring this like resiliency and optimism embedded with realism that just takes people's fear away. So then we built it around, okay, being a fearless leader. Now, just to let you know, when that branding company first said, hey, here's what the interviewee said, and I'm not trying to be humble, I was like, really? That's what they said? Because I didn't realize when I walked in a room, other people went, oh, good, I'm glad he's here. I didn't see that in the mirror. But when they came back with it, you were kind of like, okay, then let's leverage that. So it started with, you can do an inventory of yourself, but you probably aren't the best at looking at yourself in a unique way. Having some outsiders, having a mentors that are really invested in you. And then the optimum is if you can actually, have a branding consultant, and there's a lot of them out there, but have a branding consultant actually help by, and in this case, interviewing others to find out what your brand is.
Yeah, that's something we can all do even without it. We can name someone a branding consultant and go tell them to go out there and go
I mean,
talk to our friends for us, even
literally, and
or
I look at
coworkers. Even.
now, what's real interesting? If I had that branding consultant's note still, do you know what I would do with it today?
I can make an assumption, but I'm gonna let you throw
Go
the
ahead, make the
punchline.
assumption. Let's see.
I'd throw it in a chat GPT and say like come up with an action plan or survey or something like that,
Thousand
and then
percent.
distribute it out. Yeah.
I would actually take the raw interviews and I'd say, build me a brand plan with a vision, a
Yeah.
purpose, and actions and how I should go to market. And then I'd have another prompt and another prompt. But when I did mine, that was all hard work that me and a marketing person did. And so like what an advantage we have today if you choose to play this way and down this path. But if you want to
Yeah.
separate yourself from others, like rattling off your resume and your LinkedIn and what you've done, like that's not how to differentiate yourself. It really isn't. Those are artifacts that somebody can read about you. Telling them who you are is what's going to leapfrog you further.
hmm So you probably have a bigger platform than maybe some people listening to this. Doesn't mean you can't, listeners, but how then did you take your brand and really like accept it or encompass it, promote it, like so people now know who they are? What do they do with that?
Yeah, well, once again, I'm going to credit it to some marketing people that told me, like I should really do it. I had to get over myself because I was always like, I don't want to talk in the first person. I'll talk. Our company's doing this. I wasn't comfortable saying, here's what I'm doing. And to some extent, remain humble. Please remain humble. Don't build an ego. But you have to be willing to talk a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your story. You have to be vulnerable. Like for instance, I literally right before this podcast, I did a little video, and I talked about how the 1962 movie, how the West was won with John Wayne, and how right now we're in this period of, is the West being lost globally? And right in, and I said, I don't know. I know a lot about economics and finance, but I'm not an expert. But I just wonder about it. So like when you're real and authentic, people gravitate to that. So what I'd say is as you're building it, just be real, be authentic, be true to yourself. But what helped me was having a marketing person push me. Had I not had the marketing person pushing me, I wouldn't have built the brand. And then if you're just straightforward and you're seen as helping people, like my whole purpose in life is to build 1 million fearless leaders. When I wake up in the morning, that's what my goal is. So every ounce of content, everything I do, like, so I'm mentoring 30 college students. Some people would say, why the hell are you doing that? Like, that takes up a lot of your time. And I'm like, no, it's putting a lot of good in the world. And someday that will come back to me. And by the way, I get juiced by doing it. I feel great by doing it, helping people, in a tough market excel. But that also reinforces your brand of helping others and serving others. And there's one aspect of which I'll just hit, and I won't be too lengthy, is we all have to pass the good person test. Like, we all want to do business with good people. So I'll give you an example. Recently, I got to invest in a company, and I didn't know the majority owner that well, and we got to talking. And at the final, I go, I need to hear from you why you want me to be a minority owner in this. I just want to hear, like, why you've picked me. He goes, Brendan, you're a good person. I go, well, you can't say that. You don't know me. And I said, I appreciate it, but don't blow smoke up my butt. Like, you don't know me. He goes, oh no, Brendan, I know you well. I know a whole bunch of people that know you, and everybody says good things. So just stop for a second. I'm getting presented with this super cool opportunity because this one person thought I was a good person. And so I look at the hours you put in to helping others, coaching others, just doing the little random acts of kindness. They come back to you. They come back to you, man. Like, now, the difference between me when I'm 30 and when I'm 50, at 30, I thought if I did something good for you, you had to do something good for me. I was a little bit more transactional. At 50, I'm like, hey, I'm going to go do good in the world. And if I go help these kids, something later in life is going to circle back and help me. And it works. And I can tell you, I have gotten way more good brought into my life than I've put out there. But I try to keep the scales tilted and me putting more out. But I can truly tell you, the more goodness I try to put into the world, the more goodness comes home and finds me. It's really
Mm-hmm.
neat. It's like, some people call it the law of attraction. I don't know if that's ultimately what it is. I just think if you're a good person, good things will happen to you. Maybe not in the moment. And will being a good person be taken advantage of from time to time? Absolutely. You will be taken advantage of. But when you do good acts, do it with no expectation of anything in return. And then it won't bother you. Um, by the way, I can say that super easily. When I get taken advantage of, it bothers me. But I'm still on my journey to say, dude, get over it. Get over it. They took advantage of you. Shame on them.
Yeah, if you have the choice to ruminate in the negative, or good people can see good in the world. That's one of the benefits of being good.
Yeah.
If you aren't a good person, generally that changes the color of the lens, and you just see negativity all around you.
But that goes back to, if you're building a brand around being fearless and you're a good person, and you walk into the room and you're presented with a problem, odds are you're going to say, okay, guys, there's a solution to this. And you're not that negative person, that toxic person in the room to say negative things, or you're not going to talk about people in a negative light.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't do those things, people want to be around those kinds of people. Like,
Yeah.
have you ever like, okay, have you ever gone to a restaurant or a bar and you see a group having a good time and you're like, man, I wonder what they're doing? Like, you're
Mm-hmm.
attracted to positive energy. We all are attracted to positive energy. So why wouldn't you want to build yourself around being positive and being a light for others? And if you do, more things will be attracted to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as we talk about branding, I think this is so essential, and work with a lot of leaders as well. And one of the first things, especially if you're kind of moving into that higher level leadership, you have to drop the venting and you drop the negativity. It's like okay, I guess I'm moving to this position. I have to let go of these traits that I've been using to connect with people for the past 20 years of my career. and it's like this aspect of executive leadership that if you keep it, it does not benefit generally the future career that you're trying to create.
Well, do you know what I'll tell you the number one challenge if you choose this path. Here's the number one challenge you're going to face. You're going to wind up moving away and gravitating away from some people in your life that are going to hold you back. And it's unfortunate. And by the way, these might be good friends, they might be family members. They might be some of your best friends at work that become negative. And you just have to say, like, and I've done it. And by the way, it saddens me when I look at, man, I haven't talked to that person in a long time. I used to really get along. And I'm like, yeah, but they became such a negative and toxic person. I just moved away from them because I realized, like, when you're around them, they're not putting wind in your sails. And I see this on Instagram like once every 6 months, so I'm gonna maybe get it half right. But it's a saying. It says, if you're not inspired by the people in your circle, you don't have a circle, you have a cage.
Mm,
Actually, I think I got that one right.
that
Um,
sounds right.
and it's true though. If the people around you aren't inspiring you and pushing you to do more and helping fuel your journey, you don't have this great circle around you. You actually have people that are holding you in a cage. And it's tough, but you got to let some of those people go.
Yeah, this big just concept of like consistency and branding. You mentioned kind of why would you be working with college students? Well, how can you care about being fearless, being a good person, wanting to create fearless leaders and not want to serve at least some subsection of that group? And I imagine that's going to then influence your circle, the people that are around you, because you're consistent in your brand. Now, if you're around a bunch of negative people and you're trying to be consistent in a brand, all of a sudden there's going to be kind of these alternating forces that are going to make it very difficult for you to probably show up in a way that is going to build this this brand of yours that other people are also going to believe in, because they're going to, you're saying one thing, but then all of a sudden they look at you and they go, okay, it doesn't make sense.
Well, actually, let me take that a step further. You actually can dramatically hurt yourself.
Hmm.
So, if your brand is, let's say you've built this brand in the market that you're, a visionary leader, you're a great person, you're a leader, you're positive, and then you're at your kid's soccer game and you're like, man, these refs suck. This coach is horrible. Like, I can't believe this coach doesn't do this. And the parents are like, well, who are you? Like, and what winds up happening, and here's the double negative, is then when you stand up at a charity auction event and you say, hey, let's get this night going, and let's all do this for the kids. There's a parent that leans over and goes, well, oh, Mr. Negativity on the sideline all of a sudden's Mr. Happy, huh? And you actually, it's a double negative because people don't see you as real. They don't see you as authentic. And worse, they think of you as fake. And I got to tell you, if that's how people see you, you got a lot to undo. And we all know it. I just used the soccer game, the lacrosse game, the football game. You can feel those negative parents. And oh, by the
Hmm.
way, I'm sitting on the sideline. Do I have those thoughts? 1,000%. Do I think those refs are horrible? 100%. But like, barking that out, like, isn't going to help me build where the brand I want to have. Now, if after the game you're at a tailgate and the parent says, "Oh, those refs were pretty bad today. They were horrible," and this would be like, "Yeah, yep, I would agree. They were not the best." So it's not like you have to be Mr. Positivity or Miss Positivity. You can be real, but like, you got to be careful at putting up one front to the world or on social media, um, or at the office, and then being someone different. And we can all point to some people that you see on social media, and you're like, "Hey, dude, that's not your real life. That's not who you are." Like, that
Hmm.
half of that stuff you put out there is crap. Like, my favorite T-shirt of all time was, somebody had a T-shirt, and I wish I had taken a picture of it. I forget where I was, and they said, "I wish my life was half as good as you think your life is on Facebook." Now, granted, this was probably 10 years ago, and I was like, there's some truth to that. Like, like, we all just like, but guess what? We love being around. We love being around authentic people. We love being around real people. Like, hey, Brennan, how you doing? I'm doing well. How are the kids? Good. Hey, one of them, it's their freshman year. I hope they do well, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a tough one. Okay, that's authentic. If every time you talk to them, oh, how are your kids? Great. How they doing? Fantastic. How they doing? Great. All of a sudden, they're like, I don't actually know how his kids are doing. Like, he says that all the time. And as a parent, you don't go through 20 years of being a parent with every day being great. You don't go through 20 years as an executive with every day being great. So, being a little
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable and saying, man, right now with inflation and interest rates, it's going to be a tough year. We're going to figure it out, but it's going to be a tough year. People want to follow that.
Hmm. Authenticity towards whatever brand you want to be while being like following the rule of a good person.
Yeah.
And it's some people might be listening to this. And if you're having like an adverse reaction to this comment, to this conversation, that's kind of a sign to say, what is off in your world, in your life, that's creating negativity, that's making this idea seem difficult, and for whatever reason. Um, because generally, if you have large amounts of negativity in your life or anger or frustration, that's a sign also that there's some misalignment in certain places.
There's times when I've had somebody in the office and I've said, hey, right now, I'm not sure what's going on in your life, but like, you're really bringing people down in the office, and I'm here to help you. This might be a personal thing, it might be a professional thing, but like, man, what's going on? How you doing? And do you know what I get 9 out of 10 times? Man, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I am struggling right now. I can't keep up in my role. I've got a daughter in high school. Me and my wife aren't getting along. Um,
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I'm an imposter and I'm over my head in the job. And like all of a sudden you can start to break down, like, why are they going down that path? Because they probably aren't willingly going down. They didn't like wake up and say, you know what, I'm going to go to the office today and be a jackass. I'm going to be negative. But it just happens. And so many times it's fueled by some aspect of our life that's not hitting well. But we
Yeah.
bring that to other aspects of our life. Like if your job is kicking your butt, I don't know how that you don't somehow bring that into your home life. And by the way, people that say, oh, when I leave the office and I come home, I'm a different person, all that. I don't buy that. I think, can you shut the door to work and be present at home 1,000%? But if work's really challenging and difficult, I don't think you're human. I don't think you're mortal if you don't think that's somehow impacting your personal life.
Mm.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
Let's say
Yeah.
things are going really well at the office. You're probably a little brighter and sunnier at home. Or if everything is hitting on all cylinders, your kid just got into the college they wanted to. Your kid just went from elementary school to middle school, and you're so psyched at watching them grow. I think that just makes you a little more fun to be around at work. Like
Hmm.
it's really tough to separate that, and I challenge people that say they do.
And if you're wondering, taking this full circle, it sounds like you gotta ask the people around you what your brand is and
You
do a little
do,
bit of a brand audit.
and by the way, ask the people that
Yeah.
are going to give you the most honest input. Like for me, the person who gives me the best input, is my spouse, my wife. My kids are now 22 and 20. They're pretty good at helping me. They'll say, hey, I just watched a video you did. I just watched the podcast you did. That was really cool. Have you ever thought of this? Have you thought of that? Um, Look at comments that you get back. Look at what energy you pull from. And I think you'll start to see it. But the key is find out authentic people that will give you real feedback. And
Yeah.
that might not be your likely sources.
So this has been a really great conversation. I feel like maybe we've motivated some people to go explore their brand, maybe try out being a good person. It's funny to say that out loud, to be more intentional and consistent, and shared some really great traits on what are some important characteristics that people probably need to be focusing on early on in their career, but even, throughout their career. Final thoughts or words of advice for our listeners?
Yeah, I guess my final thoughts would be, my whole career, and this goes back to when I was 21, I've kind of lived by a motto. And I wish I knew exactly how I came up with it, but I'm not exactly sure. And it's have the courage to fail and the faith to succeed. And if you can live with the courage to fail, meaning, well, I'm going to try out for varsity basketball. I might not make it, but I'm going to try. I'm going to ask that girl to prom. She might say no, but I'm going to ask. I'm going to branch out and I'm going to learn AI. I'm
Yeah.
going to save money and for a down payment on a house. It might take me a while. So if you have the courage to fail, but then couple that with the faith that, if I really work hard, I can make the team. Maybe if I come up with a creative way to ask her, maybe she'll say yes. Maybe if I don't go on that vacation for the next 2 years, I can save enough for that down payment. And you have the
Mm-hmm.
faith that you're going to succeed, you'll find that you're going to be successful more than not. And here's the real gem: when you're not successful and when you fail is when you're going to grow the most.
Mm-hmm.
I look at some of my biggest growth moments personally and professionally, it's when I hit the canvas. Because you're laying on the canvas and you got to kind of dissect, how did I get here? I'm like knocked out. Like, what am I doing? How did I fail? I had this plan and it didn't work out. So many times when you win, you don't reflect back at how you won or why you won. You just celebrate the win. So I would just leave your listeners with have the courage to fail and the faith to succeed.
It's beautiful. And that helps people become fearless. And if we could only stop being afraid of disappointment or failure, because when you realize that, like you said, when you fail, it's just another opportunity to solve a new problem as well as a learning moment.
Absolutely.
Then anything is really possible. Um, Thank you. Thank you for your words of wisdom and joining us today. If listeners want to follow and connect, how can they do it?
Yeah, pretty straightforward. I got a website, Brendan P, as in Patrick, Keegan.com. You can go there. You can connect. I've got articles, podcasts, books. You can check it out there. LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Brendan P. Keegan. You can look me up there. I do respond literally to every message that I get personally. So if you send me a message, I'll respond. And probably the other area where I'm active is on Instagram. And on Instagram, my handle is at BPK Fearless. So BPK, Brendan P. Keegan, fearless.com, or not fearless.com, at BPK Fearless. You can follow me there. I try to put content out each week. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not great. Sometimes there's just a kernel of wisdom in there where you go, oh, wow, that really hit me today. So it's like anything, and the more positivity you absorb, the more positive you're going to be. So those would be 3 ways to reach me: website, LinkedIn, or Instagram.
We'll be all in the show notes. And it sounds like with Instagram, you have the courage to fail and the faith to succeed. So
Yeah.
I
Who
love it.
knows? Like every once in a while I'll put one out. I'm like, oh, that was crap. And other times I'll be like, wow, that was really good. And
Mhm.
and you get 2,000 people to look at it, and you get 20,000 people to look at it. So you find out real quick.
Mhm. Hey, and one person is changing the world. So thank you, Brendan, for changing the world, and I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for doing what you do, getting your message out there, doing what you do on your podcast, what you do in your life and career. It's making an impact as well. So thank you.
I'm taking the compliment right into my heart.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Executive Podcast, where we explore what it truly means to be a leader. If you've taken one thing away, make sure to subscribe, share, and most importantly, leave a review. Thanks again, everyone, and see you next time.